What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. Figured we'd have some fun, and I thought this was going to be a fairly easy topic to sort of go through, but as I was running through this exercise, and the exercise I should probably tell you is going through the Packers position groups and ranking them from 12 to 1, ultimately deciding on what position group is the Packers' best position group. I thought this was going to be really easy. I thought this was going to be something where like, all right, I'm going to go through, rank them 1 through 12, and then we'll kind of discuss how we got there. But it was a lot harder and frankly, a lot more fun just kind of trying to discern between the different position groups and how you'd rank them. And to be honest, I'm not totally convinced of my rankings. So I think there's 3 separate tiers, and I'll kind of go through those tiers. And I think within those tiers, there's a lot of flexibility of how you could move teams up and down. So if you want to disagree with me, if you want to rank your own below in the comments, that's fine. I'd be really intrigued to see where you guys would rank these specific position groups for the Packers. Again, this is just for fun. I don't think we have to put too much stock into this, right? But I'll start and I'll start at number 12. And before I get there, actually, the position groups that I'm going to be ranking, there's 12 of them total. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive tackle, interior offensive line. So I separated those two. Defensive line, edge rusher, inside linebacker, corner safety, and special teams. So those are the 12 that I'm going to be ranking. The first bottom tier is just one of those groups. I don't think I need to, toy around with you too much. I think you can probably guess which group that is, and that is the special teams group. So in a tier of its own, at the very bottom at number 12 is special teams. And listen, I think all of us are hoping in some capacity that we see a significant improvement in special teams. They put a lot of resources already with new coaches into the special teams group, including special teams coordinator Rich Bisaccia. I think we're starting to see more starters on this special teams group, and we'll see if that carries over into the regular season. They brought back Mason Crosby and really put a bunch of new pieces around him to hopefully make him more successful. It was 6 for 6 in I think it was minicamp or OTA. I forget which one it was. I think it was OTAs actually in his last day in OTAs, which was super windy out. They brought in a new long snapper to compete with Steven Wirtle. They brought in a new punter for holding and of course for punting as well. But the group was arguably the worst special teams in the history of special teams last year. It arguably lost them a playoff game in an all-in season at home at Lambeau Field when they were the number 1 seed. This was as bad of a position group as you could get. And I get special teams is maybe not fair to put as like a position group. It's like it's its own thing, right? But I'm still ranking them here, and I still have to put them on their lowest tier possible, number 12. And while I think that Mason Crosby can bounce back, you're hoping he's going to bounce back. Pat O'Donnell is a below average punter. I think he's going to be a lot better holder, but he's still a below average punter. There's no answer at long snapper yet. Rich Bisaccia is going to have to get this group going from the worst teams ever to trying to be serviceable. And while they're starting to put some starters out there, you just don't know how the special teams unit is going to gel. So clearly, to me, there is no question about it. Number 12 in its own tier is special teams. Then the next tier is 5 groups, and any of these 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, I think however you really want to rank them, I probably wouldn't argue too much against you, and I moved a bunch of these around. But at number 11, I'm actually going to put the interior offensive line. Now, slight spoiler for later, I'm going under the assumption that Elgton Jenkins, when he comes back, is going to play right tackle. If he's at interior offensive line, that probably changes this group quite a bit and moves them up much more. So for this exercise, Elgton Jenkins is at right tackle and not on the interior of the offensive line. So what that likely leaves you with in a best case scenario is John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, and then probably Royce Newman at right guard. You also have Jake Hansen, who could potentially, get in there. You have Zach Tom, who could get in the conversation. You also have Sean Ryan, who can get in the conversation. But what you ultimately have here is a really solid left guard in John Runyon Jr. You have a center in Josh Myers who showed flashes a season ago, and if he can take a step and be more consistent, would be a really nice center. But he was about an average level center, maybe slightly below average center a season ago. If you're looking at like top 32 centers for all teams, probably average to below average center, which is really good for a rookie. A solid left guard. a below average right guard, probably in Royce Newman, who could take a step in the right direction. Maybe Jake Hansen and Sean Ryan, Zach Tom get in that conversation as well. But you have three, I would say, average to below, average-ish offensive linemen if you're sort of averaging everything out. And then, you've got two rookies that you just don't know what you have yet in Zach Tom and Sean Ryan. Jake Hansen is probably more of a swing piece, kind of like a Lucas Patrick at best. So I just don't think first of all, you don't have a star here, right? John Runyan Jr. very well could develop into a really, really, really good football player, maybe even a Pro Bowl level guard. We'll have to wait and see on that. But I think there's an opportunity there, but he's probably not there yet. I think there's an opportunity, that Josh Myers could really take a decent step as well. But if we're just kind of going along what we saw from a season ago, and maybe even with the idea that all of these interior offensive linemen could take a step in the right direction, I still don't think you have a star here. I still think you probably have a below average player at right guard. And it just goes to the, maybe is a bigger testament to the overall position groups on this team that I think interior offensive line is number 11. Once again, if Elton Jenkins is there, that changes that quite a bit. But as of right now, with what I'm expecting, I'm putting interior offensive line at number 11 on this list. Number 10, I'm going safety. And once again, you have a really good safety in Adrian Amos. But after that, there are still question marks. And while I expect Darnell Savage to bounce back and have a better year than he did a season ago, he was a bottom 3 defender on this Packers defense a season ago, and really had some struggles. He had struggles tackling, he had struggles in coverage, he had struggles playing his position with any level of consistency. If you go back 2 years ago in 2020, I thought he had a really nice season. So what Darnell Savage do you get is the question here. And then after that, it's a multitude of question marks. Sean Davis has everything to prove. Vernon Scott has everything to prove. Innis Gaines has everything to prove. Tariq Carpenter, just a rookie 7th round pick. So you just don't know what you have with anyone outside of Savage and Amos, and Savage is still a question mark at this point. Are you going to get 2020 Darnell Savage, or are you going to get 2019 and 2021 Darnell Savage? Those are two very different players. If you get 2020 Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos remains his normal, consistent self, and any of the other safeties, whether it be Tariq Carpenter, Vernon Scott, Sean Davis, etc., take a step and can be a true number 3 safety, this group moves up quite a bit. But as of right now, you've got one really, really good player in Amos, a question mark in Savage as to exactly what he's going to be this season, and then complete question marks through the rest of the group. So for that reason, they come in at number 10 on my list. Number 9, for very similar reasons, is edge. And you have a star in Rashawn Gary. You have a very good edge rusher in Preston Smith. And then once again, it is a bunch of question marks. So the starters, you could probably bump up quite a bit on this list, but then the depth becomes a major question. You don't know what you have in Kingsley Enagbare as a rookie. Randy Ramsey's coming back from injury and always sort of profiled more as a special teams player. Tipa and Jonathan Garvin have showed absolutely nothing. Ladarius Hamilton, I'm semi-intrigued by, but it's still, you're not expecting him all of a sudden to be a really good number 3 edge rusher. So the bottom line here is you have 2 really good players. You have a 5th round pick that has some potential, but it's probably going to take him some time to develop. You have a Randy Ramsey who can probably be a pretty good special teams player for you. And then that's it. Like, you just don't have much else of anything. So if they were to add a player like a Justin Houston, as I proposed a few days ago, then this group jumps up in a massive, massive way. But where it's structured right now with not having the depth and just really having Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary, I just think they have to rank a little bit lower on the list just because you don't have any, real answer. And it's not like this is a position where Rashawn and Preston can just play 100% of the snaps and you don't have to worry about everything else, right? You're going to need rotational players here, and they just don't have them right now. So edge is number 9. Number 8 is tight end. This is a lot, going back to Robert Tonyan and just how healthy he is. And if he's ready to go week 1, as we discussed yesterday, then I think this is a group that has some potential, right? You've got Robert Tonyan probably as your number 1, who, when healthy, profiles as an above average tight end in the NFL. You've got the best blocking tight end in football, in my opinion, in Mercedes Lewis, and a really good veteran presence. And then you've got 3 players that I would say have some level of potential, right? Whether it be Tyler Davis, whether it be Josiah DeGuara, even Dominique Daphne. And you've got more of your H-back, fullback in Daphne and DeGuara. You've got more of your, receiving type tight end in Davis. You've got your overall tight end in Tunyon. You've got your blocking tight end in Lewis. How many of those they keep will remain to be seen, but I think you have okay depth here. And if Tunyon is the guy that we think he can be, especially coming back from injury, or I should say with coming back from injury, then I think this group is pretty good. If Tunyon is hurt or has a setback or doesn't perform at the level that we saw in 2019, then I think you have to rank this group a little bit lower, probably more towards that interior offensive line group where you don't really have a go-to guy, and then you've got a bunch of question marks. And yes, Lewis is nice, but he's not going to be a receiving threat. So you could easily rank this position group lower. And quite frankly, if you wanted to put this closer to number 10, closer to the interior offensive line, I could understand that. But with Tunyon expected to be back, potentially even week 1, and then the depth that they have, and Lewis being such a great blocking tight end, I have them here at number 8. And then the last group in this tier at number 7 is wide receiver. This is a really difficult group to gauge, right? Because you can make an argument that the Packers don't have a true number 1 or even number 2 wide receiver in an ideal world. I think you can make an argument that in an ideal world, Randall Cobb is a number 3 receiver. In an ideal world, Allen Lazard's a number 3 receiver. In an ideal world, Sammy Watkins is a number 3 wide receiver. In an ideal world, Christian Watson, probably like a number 3 or 4 receiver in his rookie season. And then you have Romeo Doubs and Amari Rodgers, who are more developmental guys. And while Samori Toure, same thing. While I like the overall players in this group, without having a potential true number 1 or number 2 in an ideal situation, that just ultimately has to bump this down at some point. Now, on the flip side, I think Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, Sammy Watkins, maybe even Christian Watson are all number 3 caliber wide receivers in an offense. And then you have an Amari Rodgers, you have a Romeo Doubs and a Samori Toure, who all have potential along with Christian Watson, and who knows what their ceiling could ultimately end up being. You've got a Juwan Winfrey and even a Malik Taylor, who I think are actual 53-man rosterable players on most teams as like a number 6 wide receiver. So you have 9 guys, in my opinion, who could actually be on a 53-man roster. So this is almost like the exact opposite of edge rusher and safety, where edge and safety, you've got a legit number 1 and number 2 guy, but no depth. And then in wide receiver, you've got depth for days, but you don't have a legit number 1 and number 2 guys. Now, I would prefer, I guess in an ideal situation, you'd probably prefer the number 1 and the number 2 with no depth. But I do think Lazard, Watson, this whole group, Cobb, etc. I do think this whole group has different ingredients that they're going to be able to bring to the table and collectively be better than maybe just a bunch of number 3 wide receivers, right? So I have a little bit more faith in this group, which is why I rank them at number 7. But that entire tier was interior offensive line, safety, edge, tight end, and wide receiver. And if you want to shuffle those up in any way, I wouldn't have too much of an argument with you. So that's how I have them ranked: interior offensive line 11, safety 10, edge 9, tight end 8, and wide receiver 7. But again, I think there's a lot of wiggle room there if you wanted to switch some of those up. All right, 1 through 6, I also think you could put in almost any sort of way that you wanted to, and it would be tough to argue with you. Number 6, and I really struggled with this one. You could easily put this number 1, and I would not be upset in any way, shape, or form. Number 6, I have quarterback. Now, you have the MVP of the league, so that could, in and of itself, put you at number 1. Number 2, you have a first-round pick in Jordan Love. And then, your number 3 is Danny Etling. So Danny Etling, you don't really have, in my opinion right now, a developmental guy at number 3. Jordan Love, you have a developmental guy, but I don't necessarily have a level of faith that if Rodgers is out for 6 games, that Jordan Love can lead them to a 3-3 record. To me, that's probably going to be closer to a 2-4, maybe even a 1-5 in that scenario. So I'm not sure that if you were just to rank the next backup quarterbacks, that Jordan Love would rank somewhere between 33 and 48 as like an upper echelon number 2 quarterback. But on the flip side, you have arguably the best quarterback or best player in all of football as your number 1 quarterback. So the depth here is what brings this group down is because I'm just not sure if Rodgers goes out, you have anyone else who has a level of play. I don't think they have a true developmental guy as their number 3. To me, the number 3 is just a camp arm at this point. So this comes down to Jordan Love, and he's just too much of a question mark for me to put this group any higher. So that is why I have them at number 6. As mentioned, if Rodgers alone puts you at quarterback number 1, I'm not arguing against you. I get it, and I wouldn't have any issue with that whatsoever. Number 5, I have his defensive line. You have Kenny Clark as your alpha and your guy that's going to do a little bit of everything. And now you finally got Kenny Clark help. You've got Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, who's set to improve. You've got Dean Lowry, Jonathan Ford, who's an intriguing 7th round pick, even Jack Heflin, who could play in a rotational role. You bring in a Jerron Reed. I just really like this entire group on the defensive line. I think it's the best defensive line that Green Bay's had in some time. Love the depth, love the rotation. I don't think you're going to have to use Kenny Clark as much. So once again, if you want to put this group higher, I'm probably not going to argue with you too much, but I bring them in at a solid number 5. Number 4 is really tough. And even as I'm talking out loud now, maybe this group should be at number 6 and QB and defensive line should actually moved up. But number 4 is offensive tackle. And if you are healthy, you might argue that you have the best offensive tackle tandem in all of football. And David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins at left tackle and right tackle. And then you've got Yosh Nijman, who can be a really nice swing tackle. I think that's an ideal sort of swing tackle scenario. You have Royce Newman, who can kick out to right tackle. Cole Van Lannon, who's practicing with the starters. Sean Ryan could probably, kick out in certain situations. You've got Zach Tom, who can play some tackle. You've got Rasheed Walker, who you picked in the 7th round as a developmental player. I like this group if healthy. Now, Bakhtiari and Jenkins' health is in question. You're expecting to get both back at some point. Bakhtiari could be back day 1 at training camp. Elton Jenkins could be back probably prior to midseason. And as the season goes along, you could have Bakhtiari at left, Jenkins at right, Yosh at your swing tackle, and still have some solid depth behind that. So in an ideal situation, if everyone's healthy, I think I would put them here at number 4. You could even rank them higher if everyone's healthy. You could rank them lower because you could have questions about the 2 players returning from ACL injuries. So I have them at number 4. You can move them up or down. Wouldn't argue with them too much here. Number 3 is inside linebacker. Imagine Green Bay Packers having an inside linebacker group that could even remotely rank in the top 3 in position groups. But Devontae Campbell was a first-team All-Pro. Quay Walker was your first pick in the draft. And Chris Barnes is a pretty solid player. After that, it gets a little bit more interesting, but Ray Wilborn's intriguing. You still have Ty Summers, who's been in this league for a while. You have an Isaiah McDuffie, who is a 6th round pick a season ago. So you have some intriguing names here. Overall, when you look at the top 3, I think you have to feel really comfortable with who you have as your starters and even your key backup in this situation. So Campbell, Quay, who I think is going to be a very good football player sooner rather than later, and then Chris Barnes' depth, I just had to put them pretty high. You could put them anywhere 1 through 6 and I wouldn't argue, but for me, I'm going to put them at number 3. Number 2 is cornerback, which easily has a very strong argument to be number 1. You have arguably the best cover corner in football in Jair Alexander. You have a 1st round pick from a season ago in Eric Stokes, who is a fantastic football player and should take another jump in this being his 2nd season. You have Rasul Douglas, who just got the new contract, looked great a season ago. You're hoping he continue that great play this season. But then there becomes question marks, right? Keyshawn Nixon is probably your 4, but then even after that, even if Keyshawn Nixon is a pretty decent number 4, then you've got maybe a KB Anento, maybe a Rico Gafford, Shamar Jean-Charles, and Shamar just hasn't looked all that good yet, to be honest. So if he had looked good and he looked like a real good number 4, then that changes this group and probably puts them at number 1. I think Keyshawn Nixon gets the 4, probably Shamar Jean-Charles gets one of the other 2 spots, and then I think Rico Gafford probably gets a spot as well. But this is just a really interesting group where, once again, it's kind of like your starters are great, but your depth is a big question mark. But because you have 3 and Douglas and Stokes and Jair, and they're all really good, I had to put them at number 2 on the list. And then number 1, interestingly enough, I have as running back. So you have Aaron Jones, to me, who is a pure legit starting NFL, really good starting NFL running back. You have AJ Dillon, who to me is a pure legit, really good NFL starting running back. You've got 2 of those. And then you have eventually at some point Kylan Hill, who to me projects at worst as a number 2 running back in the NFL if he was totally healthy. I think Patrick Taylor, as mentioned the other day, can be a really good back in this league as well. Then you got 2 undrafted guys, Tyler Goodson, who I think probably should have been drafted and is a very intriguing undrafted free agent. And I've been impressed with BJ Baylor as well. So I think you look at this running back group 1 through 6, and I know I've been advocating for maybe just keeping 2 running backs until Kylan Hill gets back. Part of that is because A, you're going to get Kylan Hill back, and B is because I think you're probably going to be able to get Taylor, Goodson, and Baylor back on your practice squad. But overall, the depth of this group is fantastic. You have 2 legit, really good starters in Dillon and Jones. And I have a ton of faith in Kylan Hill if he can come back anywhere close to what he was prior to the injury. So I'm actually putting running back at number 1. So just to rank those one more time, number 12, special teams, number 11, interior offensive line, 10 is safety, 9 is edge, 8 is tight end, 7 is wide receiver, 6 is quarterback, 5 is defensive line, 4 is offensive tackle, 3 is linebacker, 2 is corner, and 1 is running back. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.